Okay, let's get into this. We've received some material from Brazil that's,
Hmm.
well, it's pretty eye-opening. We're looking at this huge problem, massive fraud, targeting retirees, pensioners, and people who are often really vulnerable financially.
Absolutely. The scale is quite something.
Yeah, I mean, first estimates were around, what, Art, $6 billion lost,
Mm-hmm.
which is already shocking.
Mm-hmm. A huge sum.
But then this CGU report drops, and it's talking about $90 billion in suspicious activity just in 2023.
90 billion. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
Right. And get this, 35,000 complaints filed. It just paints this picture of,
Mm.
wow.
And it's not just the sheer volume of money, it's what it says about the system, right? Like
Yeah.
the source material you sent points out these are often unauthorized deductions, strange affiliations popping up, and people trying to fix it. They hit walls with banks, with the INSS, the Social Security Administration there.
Yeah, exactly. It really highlights how precarious things are for these retirees. Which brings us to the really, uh, let's say, peculiar part of the material you shared. Because it doesn't just lay out the awful reality of the fraud, which it does very clearly. It also puts forward this
Yeah.
really controversial, almost radical idea about how someone might theoretically survive this situation in Brazil.
Yes, the strategy it suggests is certainly unconventional. It basically proposes, look, take out all the pre-approved loans you can get, and if you can't pay them back, let your credit go bad. Get a dirty name, as the source puts it.
Hold on, wait. The advice is to deliberately take on debt you might not repay and ruin your own credit rating. That sounds completely backward.
It does, absolutely. And the source acknowledges it sounds counterintuitive, but the logic, however twisted it might seem, is this. If your credit is already trashed, completely negative. It becomes theoretically much harder for fraudsters to open more loans or commit other financial fraud in your name.
Ah, okay. I think I see. So the idea is you make yourself such a bad credit risk that you're essentially untouchable for new fraud.
Kind of, yeah, like a really bleak, self-destructive shield.
Wow. Okay. But the source connects this to something broader too, doesn't it? Like a real critique of bureaucracy.
Precisely. There's a strong undercurrent of frustration with dealing with the official channels. Banks, the INSS, the source calls it an ordeal. People face huge difficulties, lack of information, endless delays just trying to solve legitimate problems, let alone fraud.
So it's like if the system designed to help you actually makes things harder.
Then the source seems to imply maybe you need to look at other, less conventional ways to protect yourself. This perceived failure of the institutions is key to understanding why such an extreme idea is even being floated.
Right. And this feeds into another concept the material brings up, malandragem. Can you pack that a bit? It sounds like more than just being clever.
Yeah, malandragem. It translates roughly to street smarts, maybe cunning, resourcefulness. But in this context, the source presents it almost as a necessary survival philosophy. It's like navigating a broken system requires a certain kind of, well, wiliness.
Not playing by the official rules, maybe?
Sort of. It implies that sometimes you have to bend the rules or find loopholes just to get by because the straightforward path doesn't work or is blocked by bureaucracy. It's presented as pragmatic, born from necessity.
And there was an example given, right? Something about student loans. FIES.
That's right. The source mentions anecdotal cases, people who defaulted on their FIE student loans. And apparently some of them ended up getting better deals, like bigger discounts or more favorable repayment terms, than the people who paid diligently all along.
Seriously. So the message, maybe unintended, is that being correct doesn't always pay off.
That seems to be the implication the source draws, yes. It suggests that sometimes the Melandro approach, the less conventional one, might actually yield a better practical outcome in this specific environment.
Okay, this is where it gets quite concerning because it points towards a much deeper issue, right? A kind of general cynicism.
Definitely. The source highlights this pervasive feeling of distrust. Distrust in institutions, in the system as a whole.
Like people just don't believe the official ways will work or protect them.
Exactly. There's this sense that the established systems aren't reliable safeguards, and when that trust erodes, people feel like they have to take matters into their own hands, which can lead, as the source suggests, to considering these pretty extreme, almost desperate measures.
And speaking of taking matters into your own hands, the source does mention some other strategies too, right? Things that are maybe less self-destructive than ruining your credit.
Yes, it's not all about the dirty name strategy, though that's the most shocking part. It does mention more, let's say, established asset protection tactics, like consulting a lawyer, which is standard advice.
Okay, standard enough.
But then it also mentions some more Specific, maybe slightly unusual things like registering your car as a tool for work.
A work tool.
Yeah.
Why?
Presumably, the idea is to try and shield it from being seized if things go bad financially. Same logic, perhaps, for making sure your driver's license says you do paid work.
Huh. Interesting.
And transferring assets into a company's name using a CNPJ is another tactic mentioned, trying to separate personal assets from potential claims.
But then it circles back to this really stark, almost nihilistic idea, doesn't it? The ultimate protection.
Yes. The most radical suggestion in the source material is essentially the best security is having nothing left to take. If you have no significant assets, no property, no savings, well, you're not an attractive target. Not for fraudsters, not for creditors. It's a bleak sort of logic.
Wow. They have nothing.
And this connects to a statistic the source brings up.
The debt levels.
Yeah, that something like 70% of Brazilians are indebted. And the source then speculates, quite cynically, that maybe this indebted majority could eventually push for some kind of mass debt forgiveness.
And the implication is?
The unsettling implication floated is that the people who were careful, who saved, who managed their finances responsibly, they might end up footing the bill one way or another.
It's a really grim outlook presented by this source. Okay, look, we absolutely have to pause here and be crystal clear.
Yes, very important.
We are discussing the ideas presented in the source material you sent us. That's it.
We are not in any way endorsing these viewpoints or strategies.
Absolutely not. These are extreme, highly questionable, and potentially very harmful ideas. Ruining your credit, aiming to have nothing. These are dangerous paths.
Definitely. Our goal here is just to understand the perspective offered in this specific material, not to suggest anyone actually do these things.
Right. So just to recap the core tension here, on one side you have this undeniable serious crisis, widespread fraud hitting vulnerable retirees and pensioners in Brazil. It's causing real harm to real people.
A significant systemic problem.
And on the other side, presented in the source, you have these extreme, controversial, frankly disturbing ideas about how to survive within what's perceived as a broken system.
Ideas that involve basically using the system's own weaknesses against itself, even if it means damaging your own financial health as a kind of desperate self-defense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It paints a picture where frustration and perceived system failure might push people to consider truly radical, unsettling options. And it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? When people feel the system has failed them, when bureaucracy feels like an impossible wall, and when maybe, just maybe, being cunning seems to work better than playing by the rules, what does financial security even mean anymore? And, what kind of desperate measures might people feel forced to consider just to feel safe? It's definitely food for thought.